guys, welcome back to another episode of the Two Alpha Collective podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Male, and today we're going to talk about the National Defense Authorization Act, or the Defense Budget Bill, or whatever name you want to give this thing that basically Congress has to pass every year in order to keep the government working and not shut down. Right? I know you probably heard of government shutdowns. Well, this is the bill that either kind of dictates whether we shut down the government or, we keep it going. So we're going to get into this bill. We're going to get into some of the things, some of the provisions that this bill, this 2,000-page bill was proposing and people are trying to pass. When I say people, mainly Democrats. It's mainly the Democrats who try to sneak in these last-minute bills into the defense budget, the overall defense budget, knowing that Republicans, will have to probably cave to pressure because they don't want to be responsible for basically shutting the government down. So we'll get into that here in a minute. But first, I want to talk about Colin Kaepernick. This guy is in the news again. He just doesn't go away, does he? He's in the news again, this time basically because of his new Netflix special that he did called Colin in Black and White. Colin in Black and White. I believe that's what it's called. I'm actually offended that he used the word white in there. Kind of racist, actually. But Colin in Black and White, Netflix special that came out. But he's catching heat because he's basically comparing the NFL draft to slave labor. The NFL draft to slave labor. I'll give you guys a second to think about that and how ridiculous that comparison is. But I actually want to get into this because there's some things here that we need to talk about. But first, before we get into it, I'm actually going to play this clip for you guys really quick so you guys can hear from Colin himself, basically his opinion of why the NFL draft is like slave labor.
Before they put you on the field, teams poke, prod, and examine you, searching for any defect that might affect your performance. No boundary respected. No dignity left intact.
Look at this here. Come on, who wants this?
The scene cuts back and forth between slave owners and coaches. On Fox News, a former...
Okay, all right, that's enough of that. So, if you guys want to watch the special, go ahead. There's, if you don't want to watch the special because you don't want to support Colin or Netflix, I totally understand. But there's clips on YouTube all over the place, so you can definitely go on YouTube and see for yourself how in-depth they went when they were shooting this little series or documentary, whatever this is, about how NFL players are basically like black slaves of back in the day. Now, we all know that there's no comparison there. Absolutely zero comparison. In fact, it's the worst comparison you could probably make. But let's just talk about Colin Kaepernick for a second, because this is a guy who was in the NFL. He had maybe 2, maybe 3 seasons of success before he fell off. He got benched. And then ever since he got benched, that's when the trouble started, right? Because when he was a starting quarterback and he was kicking ass, there wasn't any talk about, racism and basically police brutality and all the other stuff that he brought up. But as soon as this guy got benched, he decided that he was going to take a knee during the national anthem and start all this trouble and start all this rhetoric about racism and police brutality. Mind you, he is, in fact, a failed NFL player. Nobody wants this guy. But somehow, even as a failed NFL player, he won a deal with Nike. I don't know any slaves in the history books that, as slaves, wanted a deal or an endorsement with some big brand out there back in the day, right? That it's unheard of. But somehow, as a failed NFL player, Colin Kaepernick still won a deal with Nike. And he also stated, by the way, that he wants to play in the NFL again. He wants to play in the slave league, the NFL again, right? But at the same time, he wants to he makes this special about how NFL players and NFL draft is compared to slave labor and slave auctions. And even after he said that he wanted to play in the NFL again, nobody wanted him. No team out there wanted him. Why would they? This guy was nothing but trouble. Nothing but trouble since the moment he took a knee and made the headlines. Nobody wanted anything to do with him. On top of that, he just sucks. The guy sucks as a quarterback. I'm sorry. If you're a Kaepernick fan, debate me on that. But I'll tell you all day that he sucks. Regardless, he gets this Netflix special with a racist film director. Well, she is racist, in my opinion, because this isn't the first controversial project that she's done with Netflix. She's actually made some other movies and stuff where she's basically pushing the whole systemic racism and this and that, right? When she, in fact, herself is probably racist. But, there's one thing that Colin forgot. And Colin, if you're listening, let me just let you in on a little secret. White players go through the draft combine too. It's not just you, bro. It's not just black players. There's white players, there's Asian players, there's Hispanic players, there's Hawaiian players, there's players from all over the world that came up through the football system and made it to the NFL draft combine. So you weren't the only one out there getting your hands measured and getting your vertical jump tested. Everybody goes through the system. I'm not sure how you're comparing it to slave labor. I guess back in the day, slaves were, taking height and weight into consideration and strength. And because obviously back then slave owners wanted strong slaves. It makes sense. But to compare how they measured the attributes, physical attributes of slaves back in the day to what they're doing for NFL players today during the combine is so ridiculous. So ridiculous. But here he is, hooting and hollering about how the NFL draft, which by the way you went through and you still want to play for the NFL, is comparable to slave auctions and slave labor. I mean, how are black people not offended right now? Black people out there should be 100% offended by Colin Kaepernick. He is putting every black person down, at least black men, because, well, there's no women in the NFL right now. Every black man out there should be offended by what Colin is saying, because you, at some point, just like all of us, had dreams as a little boy that we wanted to play for the NFL or our favorite football team or our favorite basketball team, whatever sport it is. Regardless of the sport that you want to play when you graduate college or in college, you have to go through the same process. Now, it may not be as detailed, for lack of better words, as the NFL draft combine, but every sports league out there has their own draft process. So how is not every black man right now in America offended by this guy? These men weren't brought over here as slaves against their free will. These are American people. These are Americans who grew up in neighborhoods who had dreams of playing in the NFL one day. So they pursued that dream. They worked their asses off. Ever since they were old enough to put shoulder pads on and a helmet, they worked their asses off on the field to make a name for themselves, to get better at the sport. And they followed that formula all the way to college, and their hard work paid off for them. And now they have a chance to be drafted by a professional football league, who, by the way, pays them millions and millions of dollars a year on top of the endorsements that they get from these other companies. They weren't sold to the NFL. The NFL didn't buy these players. Not only did they work their asses off on the field, but they worked their asses off in the classroom, because you can't play if you don't have good grades. You have to maintain a certain GPA in order to stay on the field. Otherwise, the coaches will bench you. I mean, these guys aren't exactly idiots. They're smart. They're intelligent on and off the field. And they work their asses off. And you are discounting and disparaging all of their efforts with this little series and this comparison. This is, in fact, their will. The slaves, they were brought over here in other places in the world against their will, against their free will. But these men who are now, getting drafted by the NFL, this is their will. They want this. Who are you to take that away from them? Who are you to say that, oh, you guys are slaves? You're not really free American men who now are, have a chance to play for the NFL. This is their will. And like any prestigious organization out there, you will have to compete with others who want the same thing. That's what sports are all about, competition. Who will win? Every sport out there is about competing with others who want the same thing, and only a few people win. But this is what they wanted. Key word, want. Nobody's making them go to the NFL draft combine and stick their hands out to get measured, or making them jump to see what their vertical is, or what their the 50-yard dash time is. They've been preparing all their lives for this. Don't take that away from them. But where's the NFL on this? Not a peep. Crickets. Why isn't the NFL coming out and condemning Colin Kaepernick? Why aren't NFL players coming out and doing that? I'm waiting for these NFL players who realize they aren't slaves to step up and actually say something. I mean, anytime now, guys. How ridiculous is this whole thing? And this makes the news. Yet, and I'll leave it with this last thing here. This will be my last comment. Yet, leftists want to come down on Trump for doing the tomahawk chop at a Braves game. That's the type of world we live in. This guy just offended the entire black male population in America and parts of Europe, because the NFL plays in Europe. Yet leftists want to make a big deal about Donald Trump doing the tomahawk chop at a Braves game. Get out of here. Get out of here, man. I just wanted to share that story because I just had some stuff to get off my chest. But let's dig into this National Defense Authorization Act, because, again, if you guys, who has time to read 2,000 pages? Nobody. Nobody has time. But luckily, I have some good friends that are well-versed in politics. I have the capability to do my own research. And I will tell you everything that we found, all the talking points for this bill that you guys need to know about. Now, again, the original NDAA bill was for $3.5 trillion, which was roughly $1.5 billion per page. But now it's been cut down to $1.75 trillion. So about half of what it was originally. Okay. Which is just, it's crazy. Like I can't even fathom that amount of money. But maybe as we talk about some of these things that they're trying to do, maybe it'll add up. Who knows? Now, the first thing that I want to talk about is, which a lot of us have already heard, from Joe Biden. And he wants to find businesses that have 100 employees or more. He wants to fine them up to $700,000 for refusing to have their entire workforce vaccinated, or if they don't fire the unvaxxed employees, up to $700,000. Now, I know businesses who probably have 100 employees or more may be able to afford that. But I'll tell you right now, it's probably forced a lot of businesses that are sitting right over 100 employees to probably fire enough employees to get them down to 99. So just with this rhetoric and this kind of this idea, Americans have probably already lost jobs because of this threat. Now, I said up to $700,000 because within that is also some sub-provisions that would add up to that max cap of $700,000. But that's what he wants to find. Now, he's using OSHA to do this. He's using OSHA's safety violations guidelines to do this, basically saying that this is a safety hazard, and this and that. And that's the angle that they're taking in order to get away with this. And just so you guys know, even though it was Biden who kind of, made this public, it was actually Nancy Pelosi who inserted this into the NDAA. She's the one that inserted this provision in there. Makes sense to me. She hates America. But then you have people like Representative Chip Roy, who called on all the businesses to openly rebel against vaccine mandates. Good on you, Representative Roy. And I do the same. If you are a business owner, whether you have 2 employees or 200 employees, you should openly rebel against vaccine mandates. And more companies are actually coming out to do that. You have Delta, In-N-Out. In-N-Out just recently announced that they will not be mandating vaccines for their employees or firing people. Raytheon actually just basically said that we're about to lose thousands of employees. Thousands of employees. And they're going to have to make a choice soon, which I'm happy that thousands of their employees are actually saying, no, we are not going to get the shot and we're not going to get the vaccines and you can't fire us. So, hopefully they make the right choice soon. But they're definitely one of those companies that affect, DoD contracts big time. Another company or really association that affects major logistics in our country is the American Trucking Association. And they just announced that they're not going to comply with the vaccine mandates as well either. So there's definitely more and more companies that are stepping up and saying, you know what, we're not going to do this anymore. We are not going to do this. And with that, there are several states that are now basically drawing legislation saying, you know what, you can't fire people over not getting vaccinated. States like Arizona, Arkansas, Georgia, Florida, who else was there? Indiana, Montana, New Hampshire, North Dakota, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Texas, of course, and Utah, I believe. So the momentum is building. People are getting tired. People are getting tired of this vaccine mandate. They're getting tired of, having to live like this. And the companies are getting tired of losing business. So 100% it makes sense for companies to step up and say, you know what? No, we're not going to do this. We're not going to fire our employees and we're not going to make them get the vaccine mandate unless they want to. Because obviously freedom of choice. But we'll see. I mean, this 700,000 fee that they want to assess to companies. Well, most of these companies can probably afford it. The companies that have like Raytheon, 700,000 for Raytheon is nothing, but for some companies, it can mean financial trouble. It could mean, bankruptcy. These businesses could close down because of that. Especially if their 100 or more employees are saying, no, we're not going to get the vaccine. So obviously it's a little complex, but everybody knows what the right answer is. We just need more people to get on board and put their foot down on the matter. All right. The next bill basically the next provision is tobacco. This affects the tobacco industry. So they want to double taxes on tobacco. Now let's realize that doubling taxes on tobacco is something that's been proposed many, many times because they think it's just an easy answer. Well, let's just double the taxes on tobacco, right? And I mean, I'm not the smartest guy here. I know there's people out there, especially people that are pushing, these kind of provisions through or trying to anyway. They understand that tobacco taxes are what funds schools. Tobacco taxes are what funds educational programs. So when you double the taxes, I mean, yes, you may reduce the number of smokers, and obviously smoking is bad. No one here advocates for smoking. Everybody should stop smoking. But understand that since we are free in this free country, people can pretty much do whatever they want, at least to themselves, right? And so if you want to smoke, then more power to you, smoke. But to double the taxes, on cigarettes or cigars, or I don't know, smokeless vapor cigarettes, what else is there? I forget. But if you want to double the taxes on all this stuff, I mean, you are going to reduce the number of smokers because the regular smoker can't afford to pay, $2 or more of tax per pack of cigarettes. And especially those guys that, out there, or those people out there that are smoking several packs a day, $2 or more per, or more per pack of cigarettes in taxes adds up very quickly. So will smokers quit? Or are we going to push these smokers closer to the poverty line? Because that's essentially what you're doing. I don't think smokers are going to quit. Like some of these people that have been smoking for decades are not just going to quit because you added a little bit of tax or you doubled the tax. Yeah, I guess it depends on what their financial state is. But for most people, what you're really going to be doing is you're going to push them closer to that poverty line because now they have to spend more money. It's the same concept as gas tax. Tobacco taxes pay for school and educational programs, and gas taxes, well, they pay for highways and roads. You know, and if you've driven in California or some of these other places like Kansas, I don't know where their gas tax is going, because those are some of the most terrible roads I've ever driven on. But that's what these taxes are supposed to pay for. And an example, the California gas tax, or in California, the gas tax is 53 cents per gallon, which is insane. It's insane, right? Because you're already paying, what is it, $4 to $5 a gallon, and now you're paying 53 cents per gallon, roughly. And those gas taxes go to, establishing or improving highways and roads. California also wants to go to all electric vehicles by 2035. I don't know if you guys knew that or not. But yeah, by 2035, they don't want any more gasoline or fossil fuel vehicles on the road. In fact, I think they said that they also want no more gas-powered lawnmowers or leaf blowers. None of that. No more. You're going to have to go buy the one with the cable and buy an extension cable and plug it into your house if you want to mow your lawn, or if you have some of them have battery packs that you can recharge. But they want to go all electric with the vehicles by 2035. So how will they recoup for most of the funding of the highways and road repair? Well, in their brilliance, they want to introduce mileage tax. What is mileage tax? Well, instead of charging you 53 cents per gallon in California for gas tax, they want to charge you mileage tax, which basically means they're going to somehow monitor the amount of miles that you drive every day, and they're going to tax you on it. Now, in California, driving an hour to work is not uncommon. In fact, most people drive about an hour to work, and then add 15 minutes for traffic or more, depending on what time of the day you're driving. But a lot of people commute because like when I was living in California, a lot of the people that worked in Los Angeles actually lived in Orange County. A lot of the people that worked in Los Angeles actually lived in Riverside County, which, I mean, either one of those counties is a good hour and a half to 2 hours. So now they're going to monitor your miles. Well, how are they going to monitor your miles? Are they going to make you report your odometer reading every week? Are they going to put GPS trackers on your vehicle to track your mileage? How are they going to do that? I mean, I don't know how much this mileage tax is going to be, but I can only imagine that you guys are going to end up paying way more for mileage tax than you will for gas tax. But you know what? You want to live in California for the weather, so at least you got the weather. Enjoy it. Because everything else, they're just raping you. They're raping you for every penny you make. So what is this going to do? What is this going to do to California's infrastructure over time? Well, it's going to keep failing. That's what it's going to do. And it's going to push more and more people towards that poverty line. It will. Because all they can think about is, oh, we want to be green and this and that. And yeah, I want to be green too. I want to save Mother Nature. I want to save the earth. I want to, obviously save this beautiful world that we live in for our children and grandchildren and all that. But at what cost? Who's going to pay for this? Who's going to pay for all this? Because none of this is going to be free. And oh, by the way, I forgot to tell you guys that Joe Biden said that even when this was at $3.5 trillion, this bill, he said that none of this will cost taxpayers any money. He thought you guys were actually going to believe that. None of this $3.5 trillion is going to cost taxpayers 1 cent. Well, I've already told you about two provisions in this that will cost you guys at least 1 cent. The fines for the businesses with over 100 employees, the tobacco taxes going up $2 per, gas tax, mileage tax. I think this is going to cost Americans plenty of pennies. All right, let's move on. Section 529. Section 529, and this is going to trigger some of us, is a red flag law for military personnel. So if you're a veteran, or if you serve in the military currently, active duty, National Guard, Reserve, or if you are a veteran, this could affect you. They want to pass a red flag law where if you're in the military, your chain of command could basically tell one of the judges that you are a danger to yourself or others. And military police, if you live on post, or local police, if you live off post, can come to your house, take all your guns, and you're going to have a day in court. And I guess depending on the severity of how they paint you, they might even take you in. Who knows? And you could have done nothing wrong. You probably didn't demonstrate anything, to worry people or make your chain of command think that you were harm to yourself or others. But this is what they want to pass. All it takes is one phone call from somebody in your chain of command to say, hey, Private Joe Snuffy here is a danger to himself and others. Oh, and by the way, he has guns, so we should probably take all those guns away from him. And just like that, they will come in and take your guns. Oh, and by the way, it's ex parte. You guys don't know what ex parte means. It means it's one-sided. In other words, without evidence or proof. They can take away your 2A rights, just like that. And then when you have your day in court, you're going to have to go in there with no context and basically explain to the judge that you're not a harm to yourself or others. You're just a law-abiding citizen or a member of the military, and you happen to own guns. Insane. This was sponsored by Adam Smith, who's a Democrat out of Washington, and co-sponsored by Mike Rogers, who is a Republican from Alabama. So if you live in Alabama, you need to give your Mr. Mike Rogers a call and give him a piece of your mind. All right, moving on. So they introduced public health plans. These public health plans are specifically for your teeth. Specifically. So now these public health plans will include things like root canals, bridges, if you need a crown, or basically, if you just want free teeth, this is, you can get it now. You can just go get free teeth or just go, root canals are expensive. I think somebody told me they cost a couple $1,000. I know when I got my crown, that was like an $1,100 bill. I think that was just like a temporary crown, in fact, if I remember. But I mean, dentistry is not cheap, but they're just going to give out free teeth for everybody. All right. The next provision, basically, this one gets me. They want to take a program that was designed for American children in school, and they want to apply it to quote unquote migratory children. Migratory children referring to basically all illegal aliens and illegal immigrants coming into the U.S., the ones that are going to get like $450,000 here soon. They want to give those families free breakfast and lunch at school. Like I said, this program was designed for American children, not the children of illegal aliens or people who stormed the border and then were put on buses and shipped to American cities and who, by the way, are getting $500,000 to start their new American lives. And now on top of that, they're going to use taxpayer dollars to give free breakfast and lunches to these migratory children. So explain to me how this is going to cost us anything. There are other programs for this. There are other programs specifically designed for non-American kids. Isn't that the purpose of the USAID? Isn't USAID, isn't that their sole mission? Isn't that where we should be pulling funds from? Why aren't they paying for this? Why aren't they paying for these migratory children to get free lunch and breakfast? No. We'll just slide this into this $3.5 trillion bill. We'll just slide it in there. Oh, and by the way, this isn't just for the regular school year. They want to give free breakfast and free meals and lunch and all that to these migratory children all summer long as well. I mean, this is just wrong on so many levels. Now, listen, I don't hate kids. I don't discriminate against kids because one's American and one isn't. But we're American for a reason. The people that live in this country are Americans. The people that come over here the right way, go through the process, put in their time, pay the money, put in their paperwork, they go through the entire process and they finally get their citizenship. Those are Americans. They should be the ones that benefit from these kind of programs. The free breakfast and the free lunches for the low-income families, American families, not the families who stormed the border, were put on buses, which, by the way, without getting checked for COVID, were put on buses, taken to some American city, given housing, and now they're going to give, $500,000 to each one of these families as reparations. Oh God, that is a whole different podcast. I shouldn't have even said that word because I'm going to trigger myself here in a second. But yeah, let's just give these kids free lunch and breakfast. I'll tell you this. I'll tell you guys my story really quick. I'll try to keep it short. When my family came to America from Afghanistan, we did it the way you were supposed to. We put in our paperwork. We had somebody here stateside that was assisting us with that. In fact, it was my oldest uncle, if you must know. It was my oldest uncle who was here as a foreign exchange student. And then while he was here going to school, he also helped with the paperwork to get us started for coming here the proper way. But in order to do that, we had to leave Afghanistan. We had to go to Pakistan. I think we were there for like 6 to 8 months while all of our paperwork is, getting organized and everything. And then when we finally got approved, we came to the US. We caught a flight and we came to the US. And I think it was like 3 or 4 or 5 years later, I can't remember, so long ago, we became American citizens. We got naturalized. And, we did it again. We did it the right way. And now that we were Americans, we were entitled to everything America had to offer. That's my story. I remember, my family wasn't super rich when we came here. I remember that I was getting like free meals in school for a few years until we weren't, qualified, I guess, anymore, or we didn't meet the criteria because we were making too much money. So we weren't like considered low income, but we were getting free meals, my sister and I. But that's exactly what the program was designed for. So her and I don't go hungry while all the other kids, who had more money or whatever, who could buy lunches, were eating because we were Americans too. And so these kids, I feel for them. I really do. But it's not their fault because they're children. But their parents, were basically capitalizing on a bet that the Democrats, gave them. They were invited here by the Democrats. They knew that once Joe Biden came into office, that they had a better chance of getting into the country, but they had no idea how well they would have it once they got here. Not only do they get to cross the border, but they don't get tested for COVID, so they don't have to go through that. They get to get put up and, they get some hot chow and they get probably a shower and a place to sleep for a few nights. And then they, get put on some buses and they get transported to their favorite American city and their $500,000 is probably on the way. Moving on. One of the provisions wants to cap prices on prescription drugs. They want to basically cap it off, for prescription drugs, which, listen, I'm all about. I'm all about, saving money on prescription drugs because prescription drugs are expensive and the prices have gone up for a lot of these, drugs that people need. And in most times, it's a complete ripoff. It is. I'll take epinephrine as an example. I get, so I'm not allergic to bees, but I am allergic to wasps. That's the only allergy I have, wasps. I learned this the hard way. One year when I was in college, I got stung on the side of my head by a wasp. The only reason I knew it was a wasp is because right after it stung me, it fell to the ground right next to my shoe. And I was like, obviously it hurt, it stung. And I saw that it was a wasp and I stepped on it and I proceeded to go to my English composition class. Well, 15 minutes into my composition class, the side of my head starts swelling. And I had to, a couple of the students, the professor allowed for a couple of the students to escort me over to the student medical facility where they basically told me, look, man, you had an allergic reaction to this wasp sting. And they shot me up with a steroid and that helped and everything. But they told me from now on, you need to carry epinephrine with you wherever you go. And I remember as a college student, when I bought that epinephrine, it came in a 2-pack. I think I paid like $80. I think I paid like $80 for that, but like epinephrine has definitely gone up in price over the years. In fact, most recently, the price of a pair of EpiPens is $600. $600. For what? Who can justify this drug for $600? Only Big Pharma. So yeah, I get it. Prescription drugs are too expensive and a ripoff, and there should be a cap on prices. But here is the problem. Here's the problem that I see anyway, in my opinion. And I'm not defending Big Pharma, guys. But we pay more for these drugs because we want quality drugs. Most of these drugs are made in the US, especially the important ones, the ones that really save lives. They are made here in the US. There's a process for making these drugs. In fact, I just learned not too long ago that the typical process for a vaccine to get approved, that timeline is 10 years because of all the testing, the clinical trials, and the different phases that this drug has to pass, or this vaccine in this case has to pass. It's 10 years. Now, I don't know if that's the process for all prescription drugs. I doubt it is. But the point that I'm trying to make is that because of all that scrupulous research and making sure that this thing works and it's not going to kill somebody, prices go up, of course. Why do you think cars are so expensive? You're not going to get a car for $2,000, especially not one that's a couple years old. There is a process for making these cars. They're expensive. They do crash tests all the time. They do seatbelt tests. They test, the front bumper, the rear bumper, the tires, the rotors. They test everything. That's why you're paying so much for your vehicle. Same thing with drugs. We want good drugs, but understand that in order to get the good quality drugs, then you're going to have to pay a little bit. Now, what this bill does is that it caps prices on prescription drugs. But what it's not telling you is that it's going to open up the market to the entire world. So now your drugs can come from Pakistan. Your drugs can come from Sri Lanka. Your drugs can come from some country in Europe that we've never heard of. Who knows where these drugs are going to come in from? Yeah, I mean, you're going to pay less. You'll pay less. Or at least you won't pay more because they're going to cap it off. But, if you look at where that drug was made, it's probably going to not say made in the USA. It's going to probably reduce the amount of research and development of these drugs. It's going to probably hinder testing and evaluation. I mean, look at COVID, for example. They came up with COVID in 6 months. That's all I'm going to say about that. All right. The other provision that they snuck in to this $3.5 trillion bill before it got cut down was basically to spread awareness and preventive measures in regards to COVID to birthing individuals. Birthing individuals. Why didn't they just say women? Why didn't they just say females or women or pregnant women? No, they said birthing individuals. This is a new term, by the way. I've never heard of birthing individuals. Have you guys? You remember when Democrats tried to change the lingo from birthing women to birthing people? And they caught some flack, and so they changed it back. Birthing women, because I don't know if you know this, but only women can give birth. But basically what this bill is doing, the spreading the awareness and taking preventive measures in regards to COVID for birthing individuals, is basically saying that if you're a chick who became a dude and then you got pregnant, well, this provision would include you as well. Now, there is some good in this bill, obviously. There is some good in all these bills. But the real question is it worth the cost? Is it worth the cost? I get it. You want to spread awareness and introduce preventive measures for women who are birthing. These individuals are women. Let's just call them what they are. They're women who are giving birth. So you want to spread awareness and preventive measures in regards to COVID. But why individuals? Why does it have to say individuals? We'll see. Hopefully they took that one out because it just makes no sense to me. It makes no sense. This next provision requires $2.25 billion because they want to develop a civilian climate corps. In fact, this one was introduced by AOC. AOC, this is her baby. She wants to develop a civilian climate corps. That's the actual name, Civilian Climate Corps, the CCC. That $2.25 billion is going to go to staffing and resources. It says in there that they're going to compensate employees no less than 200% above the federal poverty line. The federal poverty line right now is $26,500. So if you make $26,500 or less, you are below the federal poverty line. So that means that they're going to pay these people $53,000 approximately. $53,000. I don't know where you live, but $53,000 a year doesn't really get you much. I mean, it barely allows you to live in a 2-bedroom apartment. You might be able to afford a used car. You know, you'll get some groceries. You're not getting nice clothes. You're not taking vacations. You're not going to do little weekend getaways or go to that nice restaurant and have yourself a $300 steak and potato with wine meal. But they want to, and I forgot to mention, they want to employ 1.5 million young Americans over the next 5 years. So that's who's going to be making this $53,000. Notice I said young Americans because that's specifically what it says. They want to employ 1.5 million young Americans over the next 5 years, but they only want to pay them $53,000 a year. What is the Civilian Climate Corps? What is going to be the job of these people, these 1.5 million young Americans, that they're only making $53,000 a year? What kind of skills do you need to be part of the Civilian Climate Corps? I mean, the way I look at this isn't this just going to create 1.5 million new poor people? Okay, now granted, they're not below the federal poverty line, but $53,000, guys, come on. We all know that you're not doing much with $53,000 a year. So isn't that what they're really doing? Is creating 1.5 million new poor people, or adding 1.5 million new poor people? I don't get it. I don't get what's going on with the Civilian Climate Corps, but it's one of these provisions. Why don't they just give that money to homeless people or develop a homeless program? Why don't they give it to veterans? I mean, we could do a lot of good with $2.25 billion for homeless programs or even veterans that have no jobs or maybe homeless. But no, they want a Civilian Climate Corps. 1.5 million young Americans making only $53,000 a year. All right, the next provision is one for $15 million. So $15 million, drop in the bucket, for technical assistance centers, providing services for older individuals who are underserved due to their sexual orientation or gender identity. I don't know, what is that? How do you guys interpret that? Because to me, we're talking about older gay people, are we not? Aren't we just talking about older gay people or older LGBTQ? Is that who needs help? Is this what this program's for? Technical assistance centers providing services for older individuals who are underserved due to their sexual orientation or gender identity. So, I mean, what's wrong with the older gays? Are they depressed? Are they sad? Do they need help? Like, I don't understand. What's wrong with the older gays that's not wrong with the younger gays? I don't know if you guys watched that David Chappelle Netflix called The Closer. If you haven't watched it, highly recommend you watch it. I enjoyed it. I'm a big fan of David Chappelle, and he's just one of those guys that just doesn't give a fuck. So you guys need to watch it. But in that special, he was talking about gay people for, I don't know, like legit 34, 37 minutes. He was talking about the LGBTQ and how they kept coming after him because all these years, he would crack jokes. But mind you, David Chappelle cracks jokes on everybody. It's not like his entire career was made off of cracking jokes on the gay community. He cracks jokes on everybody. Asians, white, black, doesn't matter. Straight, gay, he doesn't discriminate. And that's what makes him so good. And that's what makes him so funny. That's what allowed for the Chappelle Show to take comedy to the next level. But, he said something about gay people, older gay people versus younger gay people. He basically said whatever happened to the OG gays? The OG gays, the ones that were tough back in the day that didn't give a shit. They didn't give a shit about what other people thought. They were gay and they were proud and they were tough. They had tough skin. And then he talks about younger gay people, and I'm not going to ruin it, but you guys need to go watch it because it's funny. It's funny. I laughed my ass off. This next bill, it requires $50 million to prevent wildlife conflicts with non-lethal methods. To prevent wildlife conflicts with non-lethal methods. So basically what they're talking about is that, cars, there's all kinds of car accidents that involve animals. You're driving down a wooded area, down a narrow lane road or something like that, and like a deer or something jumps in front of your car or tries to cross and you hit it, and you probably kill the deer, or maybe you miss it, but then you swerve and you crash and people get hurt or hopefully not. But that's basically what it's talking about. So it wants to prevent these wildlife conflicts by using non-lethal methods. Now, it doesn't really get into what those non-lethal methods are, but this is what they're trying to get at least if you ask me. I'm reading between the lines, but maybe you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. But they're trying to basically establish a gateway to go after hunting. Because isn't this what hunting is for? Is it like, if we're trying to prevent the wildlife conflicts, then that means we should obviously control the population of the wildlife. And therefore, that's why hunting is allowed. I don't believe in hunting tags and licenses and fees. I think that's unconstitutional. But, nevertheless, that is what hunting is for. If we can, why not just allow hunters to go in there and give them a couple tags or however many tags you need to bring the wildlife population under control? So if you ask me, this little bill that they snuck in there they're trying to establish a gateway to go after hunting. Because the 2A, because firearms, because guns, because gun control, right? Otherwise, why do they need $50 million to prevent wildlife conflicts with non-lethal methods? What does that even mean? That's how I took it. Anyway, moving on. So there's another bill. I don't have the dollar amount for this one, but this one is to boost outreach to hard-to-reach communities with racial and sexual minorities. Let me just read that again. Boost outreach to hard-to-reach communities with racial and sexual minorities. I didn't realize that sexual minorities are living in hard-to-reach communities. I didn't realize that. Where in this country is there a community that's hard to reach? Unless you live in the goddamn, swamps of the bayou and you need a boat and a GPS to get there, where are these racial and sexual minorities living that they're so hard to reach and are in need of dire help? Where are they getting this from? Like, is there a survey that I missed? I don't understand. Where do they get this information that all of a sudden they're just like, listen, we need some money. We need some money to boost outreach to the hard-to-reach communities, but only for the racial and sexual minorities. We're like, I can't even make this up. If they're like, Kyle, we're going to give you some money. Is there a thing that you want to tackle with this money, something that you can solve? This would be like the furthest thing from my mind. Yeah, let's boost outreach. Give me, give me 50 million to boost outreach to racial and sexual minorities, because apparently all the racial and sexual minorities live in communities that are so hard to reach. They're like leprechauns. Can't see them, but they're there. So we better give them some money. This next bill is asking for $24 billion to victims of sexual assault. Okay, it doesn't stop there. $24 billion to victims of sexual assault, domestic violence, dating violence, stalking, and sex trafficking. Now listen, I'm all for like helping the victims of these crimes. Like sexual assault, domestic violence, dating violence. Like I don't even know what dating violence is, but stalking, sex trafficking especially. I'm all about helping these victims because, for some of these victims, they're in a uncontrolled environment where they have zero control, and they just need some help getting out of it, right? But I'll tell you here in a second where this money is going to go. It's ridiculous where it's going to go, but these are the people, this is the demographic that they're going after. But first, what the hell is dating violence? What is dating violence? Where is these made up terms coming from? I get it. Isn't it dating violence? Like depending on, isn't dating violence either domestic violence, sexual assault, or rape? I mean, so why does it need its own little name? If you're dating somebody and they're violent, guess what? Stop dating them, right? Because you're just dating. You're not even boyfriend and girlfriend. You don't have a house together. You don't live in an apartment together. You're just dating. Stop dating them. Get away. Block them off your dating app or whatever it is. So where's this money going to go? Well, basically, they want to give these people free rent money. Free rent money. But here's where it gets worse. They don't want to give it to the landlords. They want to give it to the people. Like, I understand if you want to give it to the landlords because they're the ones that are losing out. If these people are not able to make rent, like everyone in California, then it's not them that is hurting. It's the landlords that might go bankrupt. It's the landlords that are hurting because none of their tenants are paying the rent. So why is the $24 billion going to go to the people? How is that going to help? What, are they going to make themselves feel better after one of these, sex crimes? What are they going to do? Buy a large TV? That's going to make them feel better? They're going to go on a shopping spree? Now you got a bunch of new clothes. That's going to make them feel better after the sexual assault? Or now that they've been saved from sex trafficking, like why not give the money to the landlords? That's who they're supposed to go to anyway. Don't give it to the people. You think they're going to give it to the landlords? No, they're completely content with living off of free rent. Those landlords will never see a dime. That's who should get the money, is the landlords. But no, they want to give it to these so-called victims. Let me take that back. I mean, they are victims. But they want to give it to the victims of these crimes. And I think it's the wrong answer. All right. The next bill is basically a new green plan for schools, which, again, I'm all about. I'm all about, creating ways to become more self-sufficient. I mean, electricity is so expensive. It's getting more and more expensive, right? But this new bill, I don't have a dollar amount, is basically to come up with a green plan for schools, including solar panels, decarbonizing, and all that other architectural stuff that goes into making a school more green, right? Now I'm all for it. I'm all for it because when I buy my house, like next summer, I'm going to buy a house. It's going to be a big fat mansion, right? Doesn't matter. But like when I buy this house, obviously I'm going to stay in this house for as long as I can, as long as I want to, but I'm going to look at ways to make this house more self-sufficient, more green. Solar panels, I'm already looking at it. Whether I go with Tesla or somebody else, doesn't matter. But I'm looking at that technology. I am looking at the technology for the windows to allow less sun to come in so that my AC doesn't have to work so hard and I don't have a $500 electricity bill, right? We all should be looking at these things for our homes. It's investments. And again, I don't have a problem with doing this for schools, but my only question is, do we actually have the money to do this? Like, where is the money coming from to do these for these schools? Because you told us that this is not coming out of taxpayer dollars. Everything I've mentioned so far seems like it's going to be coming out of taxpayer dollars. Either that or you're just going to print more money because what do we care? Printed money is going away soon anyway. Everything's going to crypto and digital currency. So let's just print more money, print more paper. So the last one that I'm going to talk about is, and I don't have a dollar amount for this one either, but it's a bill or provision that is going to provide program training for personnel to basically go make homes more efficient. I just got done talking about this, right? Like as homeowners, we should be doing this anyway. But now this provision is going to basically create a task force. It's not a task force. I'm just using military terms because that's what it translates to me. But it's basically creating a group, an organization, or whoever of people to go and make homes more efficient. They're going to look at your electricity. They're going to look at your water. They're going to look at your gas. They're going to look at your internet. They're going to look at anything else. And they're going to help you save money, or your neighborhood save money by helping you become more efficient. But again, here's the sketchy part, right? What does this mean for Big Brother? I'm going to let you into my home so that you can look at all this stuff and help me how to figure out how to save money. But what's in it for you, right? What's in it for you? Are you going to start monitoring? Is the government going to start monitoring my electricity? Are you going to monitor my water constantly every month? Do I have to report to you about how much internet I use? The websites I go to? I mean, come on. This is a slippery slope, is it not? The government wants to come in and help you make your house more efficient. What do they want in return? They always want something in return. Nothing is free. Nothing is free. We know this. Not even these free COVID vaccines are free. Well, so that's all of it. That's most of it. And I'll just close with this. $3.5 trillion, $1.75 trillion doesn't really make a difference, does it? Because regardless, it's a lot of money. It's so much money I can't fathom. In fact, I forget off the top of my head how many zeros are in trillions. But I guess my biggest problem with this is that I haven't seen any calls. I haven't seen anybody call for a debate on any of these bills, right? That's my biggest problem is where did these bills originate? Whose idea was it that they want to help sexual and racial minorities in hard to reach places? Whose idea was it that they wanted to go into schools and make them more greener? Whose idea was it to incorporate red flag laws for active duty, National Guard, Reserve, and veteran military members? Whose idea was it that they want to spend $15 million on technical assistance centers for the old gays? Where did these come from? How come there wasn't a debate? I like to watch C-SPAN every once in a while when I know like there's, something important happening. I never even heard of one of these bills being debated. Nobody in Congress or the Senate has once said anything that's been brought to my attention about a debate for these bills. Let's talk about these bills. Let's talk about these programs, these provisions. Do we in fact need them? Do the American people want them? Do the American people want them? They don't even bother to ask. They don't bother to establish a open line of communication where we can actually say, hey, no, we don't want these. You have to learn about them through podcasts like mine or your own, deep dive research to see what's actually in this bill so that you can call your representative and be like, look, this is wrong. We don't want this. Where's the dialogue? There's no dialogue. The only thing I have seen is I've seen Republicans calling for the removal of the red flag law, which I hope was taken out of the updated 1.57 trillion. I heard I've heard Republicans calling for the removal of that. And for the right reasons. There's no reason why any American should be treated like a criminal just because somebody else thinks he's a harm to himself or others. And the guy or the girl owns guns. That's horseshit. And people like Dan Crenshaw, who I'm not a big fan of, I think Dan Crenshaw is a snake in the grass. He was a big advocate of red flag laws, and he tried to defend it. In fact, I talked to Dan Crenshaw through DMs one time and had a pretty positive conversation, but he's not going to budge. The guy is for red flag laws because he wants to convince me that no, they're not going to come after you like that. Bullshit, Dan. They absolutely will. You're a fucking snake in the grass, and now you're part of the establishment. That's who you are. Thank you for your service. They don't want dialogue because that would receive bad press. Well, it would just receive press first, right? And if it receives press, then they definitely don't want the public, and they don't want the public to know because they don't want the public to understand. And ultimately, they don't want the public to have a chance to voice their concerns. That's why you guys never heard of anything that's gone into this. We'll see. I'm going to try my best to see what is in this new 1.57 trillion updated revision of the NDAA, and then we'll go from there. If there's anything new that they try to slip in there, or if they took stuff out, hopefully maybe on a future episode of this podcast, I can update you guys. Or if you guys know, then by all means, just put it down in the comments. All right, but that's it for this episode, guys. Thanks for tuning in. You guys are awesome as always. Make sure you give us a follow on this podcast. Subscribe to the podcast. If you're on Apple iTunes, please go and give us 5-star rating. Also comment, give us a nice little review of what you think is in the pod, what you think of the podcast, and then download the episodes, because believe it or not, Apple counts that analytic as a big thing for the podcast. If people are downloading episodes, even if you've already listened to it, downloading it doesn't really mean anything for you guys. It doesn't take up any kind of space on your phones, but what it does do is it boosts our analytics for the podcasts, and we would appreciate that. Also, give us make sure you go to YouTube and give us a follow on our YouTube channel, because we are posting videos on there, and we have a huge project coming up that's really going to enable us to increase our content creation, which I am super excited about. And make sure that you guys are subscribed to the newsletter on the Musa store for all the latest and greatest deals. If you haven't seen, just recently they had Streamlights on sale for like crazy percentage off. So make sure you sign up for that newsletter on themusastore.com. And lastly, give us a follow on Instagram at Kawa_M_official, as well as 2 Alpha Training Group. So if you just type in 2 Alpha Training Group, you'll see it. Give us a follow there as well. That's our training page. But obviously, I'm more active on my own personal page. And with that, we're going to call this a wrap. All right, guys. So I appreciate your time. I hope you guys take care. Have a great week. And I'll see you guys next time. Cheers.